Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Coder. I'm Chris, and today we are going to start. Actually, this will be part one. We're going to add the ability for the game to decide whether or not Pac-Man has actually won the level that he's currently on. So, and that meaning that he's basically collected all the pellets and he's ready to move on to the next stage. We're going to go all the way up until that part. We're actually not going to, in this part, talk about getting to the next stage, but we're going to lay all the groundwork that is going to be required for us to actually proceed to that next level. Okay, so in the second part of this, we're going to get into what we need to do in order to actually be on that second stage. And it's actually not going to be that difficult, but we are going to have to make some pretty drastic changes because of what's involved in going from one stage to the next. And one of those is an indicator to show that we've beaten the stage, which is all of this blue, all the blue borders here are going to have to blink white. So what we're going to do in the second part is we're going to actually because all of these are individual game objects, so I'm going to design this entire level, probably in Photoshop, create just one image, and then create a second image that's exactly like this one but created in white, so that when we set our level, when we beat it, to blink, it'll just blink between those two images, and you'll see all about how that's going to work. But yeah. I'm going to basically remove all of these extra game objects that we don't need, design this entire level, minus the pellets and everything else, in Photoshop so that we have one image for our game board. Okay? So, with that out of the way, know that that's what we're going to do next week. This week, we're basically going to figure out, okay, well, we've got this many pellets, and in order for Pac-Man to win, he has to eat that many pellets. So we just need to keep track of how many pellets he's consumed, and then continuously compare that. And then we're going to do some initial transitioning to the next level, but we're just not going to get all the way there. So what we need to do is we need to pull up our game board script. All right, so let's jump into that. Actually, there's something I need to do first that I've actually noticed. We've got these two nodes here, and I've accidentally added two tile scripts. So Pac-Man actually consumes these, which is not cool, because we actually don't need to count these as pellets being consumed, because in this tile script I've got is pellet checked, and in this one I don't. I don't need this one, so I'm going to remove this component, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other. You may or may not have this problem. I know I do, so I'm going to get rid of it, just to be on the safe side. And know that, if you've got extra pellets that you're detecting as being consumed, then you need to, actually go through and figure out which pellets those are. Okay, so I know that these were the only two pellets that I had. So let's see. What we're gonna do is, like I said, we're gonna jump into this game board script. And we've got a variable here called total pellets, okay? And if we scroll into the start method, we'll see that we've got a for loop here. And the for loop basically is mostly responsible for adding all of our pellets to our index or to our board array, but we're also counting the pellets as we add them. So total pellets here is incremented every time we find a pellet or a super pellet. So our total pellets variable, which we've defined up here, is constantly being updated until we've found all the pellets on the board. So that's one variable that we know that we need to be able to compare to. So now we need two other variables. We need one for player 1 and one for player 2. I know this isn't a 2-player game yet, but we might as well start creating things as if it were a 2-player game, so that when we do start to add that second player capability, it'll be much easier to transition into that. So we're going to create a we could probably, yeah, we can, yeah, well, let's make these private. So we'll do private int player 1 pellets consumed, and we're going to set that equal to 0, and then we're going to create another one for player 2, so player 2 pellets consumed, and set that equal to 0. Alright, so with those two variables, we can now scroll down here, and right below the update UI method, I'm going to create another method, and I'm going to call this one, let's call it, let's make it, we don't need to make it public, so we'll just do update, or it's called check pellets consumed. And that method we're going to call from our update method. So we're going to do check pellets consumed. So at every frame we're checking the pellets consumed method. And so this method is going to start running at every frame. So in this method, we're just going to say, first we're going to check and see if it's if player 1's playing. So if is player 1 up, meaning that player 1's playing. Otherwise, player 2 is playing. So here, let's put a comment. Player 1 is playing. And here, player 2 is playing. And you know, I can't stress enough how important it is to comment your code. Always comment your code, because when you're writing code, oftentimes you're going to get to a point where you're writing things and you're in the zone so much that when you're writing your code, it makes sense to you at the time, and then you look at it a week later and you're like, ooh, what does that do? I don't remember what that does. So as you're writing, consciously make an effort to actually comment your code. So, you know, this may be straightforward, is player 1 up? To some people, but to some people it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, to us it means that player 1's playing. So we're going to write player 1 is playing. And anyone then looking at this code will be like, okay, well, player 1 is playing, or otherwise player 2 is playing. Makes sense. Anyone, meaning you as well, looking at your own code, looking at your comments. I can't tell you how many times I've actually looked back at my comments and I'm like, oh my god, thank you for being here, because otherwise I wouldn't know what the heck's going on. So, got player 1 is playing, right? So then what we do is we say if total pellets equals player 1 pellets consumed. So that means basically if the player 1 pellets consumed is equal to the number of total pellets, then we know that player 1 is won and can move on to the next level. So if player 2 is playing, we do the same thing. We say if total pellets equals player 2 pellets consumed. Okay. Player 2 is won and can go on to the next level. So as a test, let's do this. Let's add another method, and we'll call this one, let's call it player win. And then we're going to do an integer parameter, and we're going to call this player num. Okay. So then if player 1 wins, we're going to call player win, and we're going to pass in 1 for player 1. If player 2 wins, we're going to call player win and pass in 2 for player 2. So now in our player win method, right now what we're going to do is we're going to just do a debug statement. Okay. Debug.log. Player number, and then we're going to pass in our player num, can move to the next level. Alright, so that's what's going to happen right now, is if the player wins, then it's going to call this method and it's going to tell us which player can move to the next level. We have to do one more thing. We've got player 1 pellets consumed and player 2 pellets consumed. Well, we need to actually call these, and that, you know what, we need to actually go back and make these public. So let's go up and we're going to make these variables public variables so that we can access them from the Pac-Man script. So public int player 1 pellets consumed and public int player 2 pellets consumed. So let's save that and let's go into the Pac-Man script. And now if we scroll in the Pac-Man script all the way to consume pellet, our consume pellet method. Now if we scroll up a little bit, we say if game menu dot is one player game. So this is one player game. So here we're going to do game object dot find game transform get component game board dot player 1 pellets consumed, and we're just going to do plus plus to increment the number of pellets consumed, because this method checks to see if the tile hasn't been consumed and if it's a pellet or a super pellet. So as long as it's a pellet or super pellet, it's going to increment our player 1 pellets consumed. So if we're in a 1-player game, we don't have to check to see if we're playing a 2-player game, or well, we're checking to see if we're playing a 2-player game, but we don't need to check to see if we need to update the first player or the second player score because we're in a 1-player game. So otherwise, if we're not in a 1-player game, that means we're in a 2-player game. So now we have to check, okay, well, is the first player playing or is the second player playing? And if the first player is playing, we can just take this, copy it, and paste it right here. And for the second player, I'm just going to paste the same thing too, but I'm going to change player 1 pellets consumed to player 2 pellets consumed. Okay? And then we can actually get rid of this pellets consumed here because we're actually not using that anymore. Alright, so let's just, we'll delete it out. And let me just do a search and make sure that that's not being used anywhere. Oops. Pellets consumed. Nope, just up here. Alright, so we can delete this as well. Pellets consumed. Alright. So, now that we're counting up the pellets consumed, that means that every time a pellet is consumed, and not every time a pellet is consumed, but basically every frame, this checks to see what the value is of these. And when the value of these equals the total pellets, then we call this player win method, which should then output this into our log, okay, into our console. So, with all of those saved, let's go into Unity and see if we can't get that message to pop up. First, let me clear this. Alright. So, we're playing now. I'm going to switch to the console. Alright, I'm going to clear it. Alright, so let's play. Whoa. I really love how the game is actually coming together. It's looking really good. So much nostalgia. Shit. That was close. We are almost done. Whoa, okay. So I'm gonna pause it for a second. Alright, so as you can tell, you know, when we consume the last pellet, we've got player 1 can move to the next level. Okay? So, and that's it. That's really all we need in order to know if Pac-Man has won the game. Alright? So what we're gonna do is you know what? Let's go ahead and do a couple of more things here. let's open our game board class back up. And we've got this player when method, but what we really need, well, here's what we need to do. We need to create an enumerator. So we're going to do iEnumerator, and we're going to call this process when, and we're going to do float and delay because we want to wait for a specific amount of time. Okay, and the amount of time that we want to wait is probably about a second, or maybe two. Let's wait 2 seconds. So what happens is when Pac-Man eats his last pellet, there's a pause. Okay, kind of like how when he is consumed by a ghost, there's a pause. So we're gonna pause for 2 seconds, and then after those 2 seconds are up, what happens is everything disappears. The ghosts and Pac-Man disappear, and after that the game board starts to blink, and then after that the level restarts at a higher difficulty. Okay, so we're gonna get all the way to making everything disappear. So we're gonna do the pause, and we're going to make sure that everything disappears, and then basically that's it. There's no more gameplay. All right, so the way that we do that is first we are going to pause everything. So we're gonna do game object Pac-Man equals game object dot find game object with tag Pac-Man. Actually, find. I think we're just gonna do dot find, and I think it's just Pac-Man. All right, so we'll do that, and then we'll do Pac-Man transform dot get component Pac-Man dot can move equals false, and we're going to disable the animator. So Pac-Man dot transform dot get component animator dot enabled equals false. Okay, so we've disabled Pac-Man's ability to move, and we are disabling the animator so that he stops chomping. Then we also need to stop the audio source, so we're going to say transform dot audio dot get component audio source dot stop. Okay, and that stops all of our audio. Then we need to hide or stop all the ghosts, so we're going to do game object, and it's going to be an array, and we're going to call it O equals game object. Oops. Game object dot find objects with tag, and that gets, because we're doing objects instead of object, that gets a an array of everything. Okay, so, and the tag that we're looking for is ghost. So everything with a tag ghost is basically going to be in our O game object array. We're going to do for each game object ghost in O. Okay, so for every object that's in the O array, we're going to assign it to ghost. Okay, and that's going to iterate over our O array. And then for that, we're going to do ghost dot transform dot get component, and then we're going to get the ghost component, which is the script, and we're going to set the can move property to false. And then we're going to do ghost.transform, transform.get component, animator, and we're going to set that enabled property to false as well. Okay? And then finally we're going to do yield, return, new, wait 4 seconds. We're going to pass in delay. Alright, so we're going to wait. And then we're going to do let's see here. We could, at this point after the delay, we could hide everything here, but let's do that in a new method. We'll just create another iEnumerator, hide hide ghosts and Pac-Man. Actually, no, we'll call this blink board. And we will pass in a float parameter, call this one delay again. So we're gonna call blink board. Alright, so start coroutine, blink board, and that's gonna be 2 seconds again. Here we're gonna get rid of this, and we are going to change this. What we're gonna do, let's save. We're going to create a variable, a few of them. I'm going to say private int player1 level equals 1, private int player2 level equals 1, and then scroll back down, and in our player win method, we're going to say if is player1 up, else, okay. So if player 1 is playing, then we're going to increment that level variable. So player 1 level plus plus. And otherwise, player 2 level plus plus. And actually, if player num, which we probably don't even need this player number, come to think of it, but let's leave it in there for you know, simplicity. So then we are going to process win, and actually let's go here, start coroutine, and we're going to start the process win coroutine, and it's going to last for 2 seconds. So basically we're going to stop everything, and everything's going to be stopped for 2 seconds, and then we're going to call this blink board, which the first thing the blink board's going to do is it's going to hide everything. So we're going to do game object Pac-Man equals game object dot find, and we're going to find Pac-Man, and then we're going to use that game object, and we are going to get rid of its sprite renderer. So get component sprite renderer dot enabled equals false. Then we're going to do the same thing to the ghosts. So again, game object, and it's going to be an array. O game object dot find game objects with tag ghost, and for each game object ghost in O, we are going to do ghost.transform.getComponent sprite renderer dot enabled equals false. Alright. And then finally we're just going to do yield return wait for seconds, and we're going to do our delay. Oops. And then after this, we would basically call another method, or actually after this, well, before this here, we would actually need to blink the board. Okay, so blink board. That would happen before the delay, and while the delay is occurring, the board would be blinking, and then after the delay is over, we would restart the game at the next level. So, and that's where we're gonna stop. But just to show you that all of this stuff is gonna work, hopefully, we're gonna play the game and see what happens. Oh, we have compiler errors. All right. Yield return new. Wait for seconds. There. All right. Back to Unity. Play. Alright, and now we're going to check and see if Pac-Man and the ghosts pause and if they disappear. Ah! I actually do have to win in order for that to happen. All those points I'm racking up. Ah! This is not looking so good for me right now. Almost there. And there we go. And we paused, and we've disappeared. And at this point, the game board would start blinking, and then after the blinking, well, we would start the next level. And that is going to be part 2 of the winning tutorial. Yeah, so I didn't want to overwhelm you guys with too much, and I'm going to try to keep these tutorials a little shorter, because I know that once they become long, they start to become drawn out and hard to follow. So I'm going to try to keep it a little shorter and maybe make the explanations a little longer. So you guys let me know whatever works best for you. I'm fine either way. So with that said, again, shout out to Mark. Thank you for supporting me on Patreon. Appreciate it. Guys, if you like the video, give me a thumbs up. Comments go down below. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys next week.